Welcome, fans, to a special edition of the GP Productions Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling. We have a man on tonight who has had an absolutely tremendous career in the wrestling business, a man who many will remember from syndicated television in the 80s and 90s. But before we get into the discussion with Mr. Dusty Wolf, I'd like to welcome Maurice to your own show once again, sir.
This is becoming a regular habit for us, Dusty, because my internet connection is pretty rubbish at the best of times. So we're running this stream to Ireland from Canada via Texas. So that's what we're doing today.
Works for me.
Yeah. So look, I suppose like the best or the only question to ask is, how did you decide ultimately that you wanted to be a professional wrestler?
Growing up, I was playing baseball and I wrestled. I wasn't much of a football player. I certainly wasn't very good at basketball. But I wanted to be an athlete, and I lost my chance at playing baseball. And so I said, I'm going to give wrestling a try. And I was 18. I was already out of high school, and I'd already been in college a little bit. And I had made up my mind that I'll quit college, give the wrestling business a try, because at 18, if it doesn't work out, 19, 20, you're not too old to go back to college. That was my plan. And if it worked out, great. And I went back to college. I was 47. So that's how I got it. I just decided I'm going to try. And that's pretty much my life. I make a decision. I'm going to try to do something. I couldn't see the screen, but I'm going to try to do something, and I just jump in and make all the mistakes, and fight my way through, and figure a way out, and usually come out on the other side. But that was it. I was 18 years old when I said I'm going to give it a try. And Joe Blanchard still had Southwest Championship Wrestling down here, so I knew I had a place potentially to go to. And that's what I did.
One of the initial
Who trained you, Dusty?
Ken Johnson, fellow, he helped break Shawn Michaels in with Jose Lothario. He never left home. It was a great talent. The only time he ever left home was if I would take him, like South Africa or Singapore or something like that. He didn't want to leave. He liked home cooking. He wasn't going to leave home, but he was a great talent, and he was an even better teacher. He was instrumental in training, as I said, Sean and Paul London, and Spanky, and Lance,
Cade,
yes, that crew. He was in Sean's school there for a while, and he was instrumental in them. And then once I started, Joe Blanchard was like, "Well, if you're going to do this, you're going to learn the right way," and he gave me to Don Carson. I don't know if you guys, either one of you remember Don Carson. He managed the Mongolian Stomper, and he had a big career out in Knoxville and Mobile and places like that. And between those two, that's how I broke in and got started.
one of the territories that you worked that caught my eye in terms of historical significance was World Class. Mm-hmm. In 87, and you did a few matches at the world famous Sportatorium that doesn't exist anymore. So first part of a two-part question is your memories working that territory and that venue during that period of time, which was right around the end of the major peak period, if my facts have me correct.
That's probably the biggest takeaway that I have. There were still hotspots. By that I mean there were still towns that were doing well. Fort Worth did okay still, that sort of thing. Dallas was still doing okay. But you could see the cracks showing in the foundation. Kerry had just been hurt. Kevin wasn't reliable. Mike was sick. And it was just running on fumes. It really was in that respect, as far as, a Von Erichs or the Von Erichs. They were huge. Anybody that says they weren't, there was about a 5-year period there that they were as big as anybody in wrestling. And this was the end of that time period. They had, David had been dead a couple of years, and the two other brothers, like I said, they were on the sidelines. And you had Lance, and then you had Kevin, and Kevin couldn't be relied on. So Dallas was the perfect territory for a guy to go in and learn. I was still learning, and short trips. When I had time off, I just come home. I didn't have to stay in Dallas like in other places where your time off, you're living there. I just come home. That was perfect. Like I said, everything was so revolved around involving the Von Erichs that when they started falling by the wayside, the territory was gone. It was just a matter of time.
Yeah, you just mentioned, coincidentally enough, that you worked Lance Von Erich,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a topic to this day of somewhat debate amongst fans. What was your thought at the time, or whether you were figured in the back enough about him being brought in and his reception, Ricky Vaughn?
He was over. The people loved him. The people didn't have an issue with Lance. Lance carried that territory for months. I'll just be honest. The two brothers were on the shelf carrying Mike. Kevin couldn't make towns 50 miles from Dallas. He was so pilled out in those days. I don't know what he's like today. Hopefully he's okay, but in those days he was in bad shape. So there were times when Lance was working 2 and 3 times a night, carrying the territory. People loved him. I'm good friends with Lance. I don't talk to him enough, but we've always been close. And I've always felt like he gets a raw deal from the fans. I mean, there's no such thing as a real Von Erich to begin with. I don't care who I make mad. They're all named Atkinson. Fritz created the legend. Fritz, and rightfully so, he earned it. The boys, especially Kerry and David, earned their parts. So, I mean, I get the idea that, there's a family legacy, blah, blah, blah. But Fritz created it all from the beginning, including Lance. So I don't get why there's such backlash on Lance. I really don't. I've never understood that. Especially, like I say, when a guy like me sitting there watching him have to cover the idea that he's the only Von Erich available.
Mm.
And they're building everything. They're putting everything on his shoulders. And it's not his legacy. It's Fritz's and his boys. So I've never understood it. Lance, considering he was as green as he was at the time, did a tremendous job. I think it's just some kind of cult mentality. That's all it can be. And you're not going to do anything about it. You're not going to change it. So.
Maurice?
Yeah. Yep. Dusty, just curious to know then how the later in that same year, 1987 as well, I believe, is when you ended up on WWF television. So how did that all come about?
All right, I'm trying to figure out how to center myself in this thing. There we go. I've got 2 master's degrees, but I don't know how to do technology. No, I was working in Hawaii for Leo Malavia, and I had stopped in L.A. to work for a local guy there in L.A., and I was looking at those paydays, and I was looking at what I was making in Dallas because I was still in Dallas. And I had just talked to a couple of the fellows that were in and out of New York, and I'm like, the worst thing they tell me is no. So I went to a payphone in LAX. I had just landed from Hawaii, and I was headed, waiting for my ride for the show there in California. And I picked up the phone. I knew Terry Garver from Kansas City, and I asked, when I called the office, I asked Terry Garver was there, and luckily he was. And he answered the phone for me, and we had about a 2-minute conversation. And the gist of it was, I can bring you in the beginning. It'll probably be just TVs. You'll just be doing jobs. And I'm like, well, Terry, I'm putting people over now, and I'm not making it in a week what I hear you're paying in one night.
Yeah.
And the only thing that, 40 years later, or almost 40 years later, that I don't even regret it, but I might have thought twice about it, was that those tapes were going to live forever. Yeah, I might have thought about that, but the tapes didn't live forever in 87. So there wasn't even a thought in my mind. And that's how I got started. He's like, all right, well, we're in Phoenix and Las Vegas, or Las Vegas. There are 2 days where they do the TV superstars and challenging 2 days in a row, that sort of thing. And I'm already in LA. And so I just stayed the extra 2 or 3 days after that show in California. And right after that, that's when they pulled me off to the side. It was in LA. I don't remember if we were in Vegas or Phoenix, but one of the two shows, they pulled me off to the side and reinforced, we don't know what we can do as far as any kind of full-time work, but here's some dates. And that was it. I've never signed a contract one. Never. I was there 6 years. I never signed a contract. I might have signed a release or two here or there that's kept me from making $1 or two that I didn't understand in my mid-20s, but I never signed a contract ever. I went on basically a phone call type handshake with Terry Garvin.
Yeah.
It's unheard of.
So you had the freedom then to kind of work independent days.
I did. If they were keeping me busy, like there was one time I went days. I mean, I went weeks before I got a day off. And there were other times where it was TVs and that was it. And then there were times where they would call me, can you make a town? Sure. Can you make these next 3 towns? Yeah. More than once I'd be at TV and they're like, can you make the remainder of the run? Yeah, I'm not there. There were times I was on the booking sheet and there was times I never saw the booking sheet. But I did. I worked wherever. If I had the open dates, I worked because I never had that piece of paper. There were times where I got off the plane from Japan and went straight to TV for events and things like that.
Yeah, one of the matches that you did for WWF and Superstars were against the British Bulldogs, and just wanted to get your impression of working with Dynamite at that time. But I noticed one of your partners in that series of matches that you had on and off. One of them, I think it might have been your first, was with Johnny Canine, who
I remember that.
Who as a Canadian has an extensive history here in the criminal justice system. Just want to know your thoughts on.
I had no clue. I had no clue about Johnny Canine then. I mean, I knew of him. I'd met him a time or two. I didn't know anything about his personal life any more than he knew about mine. I mean, we didn't. Oh, we're working tonight. Okay. I mean, that's the extent of it. I actually worked with him in a couple of Ontario towns that weren't on TV in that time period. As far as Dynamite was a prick. Just plain, simple English, he was a prick. He had a little man's attitude. I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but it's difficult when there's nothing good to say about him in my world. I'm sure somebody has something good to say about him. He would abuse people and enjoyed abusing people. He wanted you to fight him because he had that little man syndrome. And there was nothing a guy like me is going to be able to do on TV because that's not what I'm there to be paid for. And I liked paying my bills. So, and he knew it. He knew that, and he used it. But Davey wouldn't do that to a person. Dynamite would. It was night and day between those two.
Was it somewhat gratifying then, as a person who worked against him, to hear of the situation with Jacques Rougeau that resulted in his teeth being taken out?
Yep. Because that was somebody that had enough pull, enough stroke with the office that could actually stand up for themselves. And whether the sucker punch was, some people gonna say they never should have sucker punched him. Dynamite had done enough things to enough people down through the years, and the sucker punch was the least of his worries. Truthfully, I mean, really and truthfully, it was. I mean, he's lucky nobody shot him or stabbed him, or ran him over, or just straight out just bashed his head in. He was that bad to people.
Maurice?
Yeah, I suppose another kind of polarizing figure, and most people don't have good things to say about him, but we actually had the crippler Brian Costello on a couple of weeks back, and he spoke very highly of the Ultimate Warrior. What was your experience? I know you worked a lot of matches with him.
I knew him from day one because he broke in Dallas about the same time I was working in Dallas. And the things you hear about him are true, but I never had to deal with any of that. Because just like Brian, and I know Brian well at the time, and we rode together and stuff more than once. We weren't in a position to where we were having to compete. The spots in those days, the higher up the card, the better money you made. There was no guaranteed money, so those guys could get cutthroat with each other at times. And the Warrior came in to the wrestling business, and the one thing he did that I completely understand and always said God bless him for is, this is my way of making the most money I can as quickly as I can, because it's not going to last forever. He understood that concept. Whatever else went on with him as a person and between him and someone else, those stories are usually true. But that's also what made so many mad, was he didn't come in, loving the business and wanted to stay a part of the business, et cetera, et cetera. It was a means to an end for him. And I understood that completely. I was always like, Google, please put me in that position just once. Just one time, let me get to the point. I don't know what to do with all this money. I'll do like him. I'll start putting some of it in real estate and whatever. And that's what he did. So he was intelligent that way.
Yeah.
But he had a bad attitude. He did. He resented. I don't know exactly what he resented, but he had a resentment going on about some things. It came through. You saw it.
Yep, Jack.
Yeah, and another opponent that you had quite a lengthy and continuous house show run to start off with, but also on TV that a lot of fans remember is Ravishing Rick Rude.
Yeah.
Another guy who, depending on who you speak to, is either a locker room leader or a difficult individual. What were your experiences working Rude so many times?
I liked Rick Rude. I would say we weren't big buddies, but I think it helped me with Rude that we knew each other in Memphis a little bit. We had been in Memphis together. Not that we were big buddies there either, but we at least had an idea of who each person was. And again, he was in a position that I wasn't a threat to, so he didn't have to watch his back with me, which could happen. Those guys, sometimes it was just a simple, there were knives in the back, and he didn't have that problem with me. I liked Rick. He was moody. Let's be honest, he was moody. A lot of the guys were. I mean, sometimes it was just the stress of just nonstop. Town to town to town to town, and then that will break your mentality down. It will break your mood. And like I say, he treated me well because he knew I wasn't going to do anything except whatever we were calling, and I was going to do my thing and then get him over. So we got along okay. I mean, there was like a couple of guys up there that I didn't get along with, Dynamite being one of them. Other than that, I try to get along with everybody because, I mean, this is our income.
Yeah.
We're putting our bodies in each other's hands. So that was always my mentality, get along with as many people as I can when I walk through that door. If I just can't, I just can't. But otherwise, I'll find a way. We'll go from there.
Do you have any memories, Dusty? This wasn't on our sheet, Jack, but it just in the time zone that you were there. What was the environment like in the WWF around the time of the steroid trial?
I was there. People were worried. Let's don't lie about it later or sugarcoat it 30 years later. People were worried. Business dropped. Business was affected. We saw our checks. We were in the same towns and the crowd. You look out. You're looking at where's all the people, and your checks reflected that. That was my beginning of my end. I was getting to where I wasn't making the same kind of money, and I'm not doing anything except by now I'm already pigeonholed anyway. I'm a job guy. That's what I do. Regardless of whether I had any talent or didn't have any talent, I wasn't going to go any further because I already was there. And that was my beginning and my end of them. They went from 3 towns a night to 2 towns a night, if that gives you an idea of how business was changing because of the steroid trials and so forth. J.J. Dillon took a lot of the responsibilities that were going on during that time. I remember J.J. became very important just all at once during that general time period. We didn't see Vince as much as often as we did. That sort of thing. But like anything else that the talent does, we didn't go anywhere because it was our job, unless they told us we were done. So, everything changed. Everything changed. Downsized. If you remember, I left in '93. They were back in high school gyms for a while in that 92, 93, or the 94 time period. And they hadn't been in high school gyms since 86 and 87. I don't think we saw a high school gym in the 6 years I was there. I might have seen 1 or 2 when I first began, right, as WrestleMania was so hot. And then there was never another one. Yeah, I did 1 or 2 in the New Jersey area where there was some kind of fundraiser deals that had been set up previously. But we never saw anything outside of an arena ever again until 93, and all of a sudden you're in these little buildings again. The writing's on the wall. I've been here 6 years. I'm not going any further. The money's not what it once was. The bookings aren't what they once were because it's no longer 3 towns a night. Now it's just 2. So, it was time to go. That was the beginning of the whole system. It's time for me to go was the steroid trials.
Yeah. You touched on Vince McMahon there earlier. Do you have any notable memories of speaking with him over the years?
Well, I would talk to him on occasion. I was so far down the ladder that I usually dealt with, the office, whether it was Terry or Pat or JJ or one of the agents. But he'd speak to me on occasion, especially when I was running Zeus around, because Zeus was a big investment to him. Mm-hmm. And there were times where he would sit me down and he would, what's going on with you? And he was pumping me for information. But Vince and that whole office, I've said it before, they had no reason to hire me in the first place. They had no reason to let me stick around for 6 years. So I'm not going to bash him. I'll tell the truth of what I saw or I didn't see, but I'm not one of those guys that's going to bash him. It's just I have no reason. Maybe I should. They might hire me back, but that seems to be like the MO. The more trash I talk about him, but I also don't need the paydays either. So
someone said they love your shirt, Dusty. That's from
Richie. I appreciate that. This is one of my tamer ones. I figure that when I go into those classrooms, I've got to give them a little something to talk about because I teach history and political science. They don't care. They're there because it's a requirement. Even in college, we have the requirements. So I give them a little something to talk about. I have a whole closet full of interesting shirts. Yeah.
Does the pro wrestling ever come up in conversation in class?
Very seldom. My students are too young to have remembered me anyway. So I had one class about 4 years ago that one of the students about halfway through the semester, my uncle says he knows you. And I'm a native San Antonian, so that's possible. Where kind of worried me. Because I haven't always been a law-abiding citizen, not like most of us at this age. So I'm like, okay. And he says, yeah, he knows that he used to be a wrestler by that name. And that was me. And I lost it. That class was done. Every device came out. And they're all YouTubing and they're all Googling. And I'm like, you guys can go home. We're done. Yeah. And then this actual semester at this time, I have another university I teach at in face-to-face classes. And on the introduction day, I'm like, okay, what are there any questions for me? One of my little girls, she's like, well, what did you do before? Because I tell them the truth. I'm non-traditional student, et cetera. And I told the truth. Same thing. Okay, the introductions are done. I'll see you guys on Tuesday or Thursday or whatever day the next class was. That's the only times. My students are too young. Mm-hmm. I retired in 2011, and the average age, 20. So they were like 7 or 8 years old. And I had been on Vince's TV since '93, when their parents were children.
Yeah.
Then I was on WCW TV, but I haven't been on that since 98, 99, 2000 at the latest, 99 probably. So no, I mean the career just doesn't come up. My coworkers know.
Yeah.
But other than that, no. And then not all my coworkers know because I don't talk about it. It's a different world.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they can't accept me for what I do on those college campuses, then I don't need to be there. And I don't care how arrogant that sounds. I really don't, because I didn't go out and earn these degrees and put my family through what I put my family through, earning these degrees, and to play off of some kind of, I don't even call it celebrity because I never was, but some kind of notoriety. That's the word. No, if I can't do the job, then I don't need to be there. So.
Jack?
Yeah, twice. That's and both times when they start breaking out the devices and ignoring everything, and then
it's over.
Yeah, so there's no reason for me to do it. It's not like, oh, well, let me show you like and do the no, I can't. None of that. That's just horseshit.
You had quite a house show run with an incredible athlete, legendary. A couple of runs in with Bill Watts and the NWA, but then went to the WWF as the Red Rooster, and Terry Taylor, the worst gimmick a lot of folks say of all time. What were your thoughts on that and working with him during that time frame?
Well, the gimmick was a punishment. We all know that by now. I don't care what anybody in the office tries to say or tell the lie that it wasn't, and such. It was. Terry Taylor was tremendous. I will tell anybody he was one of the best talents I've ever been in the ring with. Once he left New York, he helped book WCW for a while. He brought me to WCW. He helped run a couple of smaller offices in the South. People that were trying to pick up the pieces after Bill Watts, and you just run some of the same town and so on. And he kept me busy there. I've heard all the stories about stooging and that. You don't work in the office if you don't stooge. You know that. The man's in the office, don't tell him anything you don't want him to know. Don't do anything in front of him you don't want him to know. But in the ring, tremendous. Probably the most underrated guy I worked with that we know of, that people would know of. Not necessarily somebody on the independent scene that really just never got a break or should have. But yeah.
How did he feel about the gimmick, or did he crack to you or the boys in the back about it at the time?
I don't think he was real happy about it. I really don't, but he was smart enough to realize that he'd been punished for popping off, so he wasn't going to pop off again. Because the whole idea of the Red Rooster was because he had popped off. And, I could have done this, or you should have done that with me, or that's where you got the Red Rooster. Vince can do that to a man more than once to show you who the boss is.
Maurice?
Yeah. One man that you worked with a lot as well that I've never heard anyone say a bad word about is Owen Hart. What was he like as a person and an athlete?
Really good guy. I mean, we weren't close.
Yeah.
I knew Jim better than I knew Owen or Brett. Just the way things worked. Owen was another one that he realized I could work a little bit. And so whenever we would work, he would make sure that he wasn't going to eat me up. He wasn't going to try to eat me up. He made sure we had decent matches. As great as you're going to get him out of a guy that's been beat, he's like 1 in 192 versus a guy that's being pushed. He would go out of his way to make a match work. Always one of those guys. Whenever you hear somebody talk about how he enjoyed life, they're not lying to you. He did. He just enjoyed life. A great guy. He really was. I'm like you. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Owen, except Austin and the broken neck. I don't blame Austin. Break my neck, I might not have anything nice to say about you either. So,
yeah. Jack.
So working during the time frame that you did in WWF, and although we haven't touched on it much, WCW, inevitably you cross paths with the immortal Hulk Hogan. Do you have any notable interactions with the Hulkster, and what were your thoughts?
Year or so I had Zeus, I was around him all the time. Because I was kind of like a translator for Zeus. I wasn't just his, his driver and caretaker or babysitter, whatever term you want to use. Zeus would bring me into his meetings because he didn't understand. He didn't know the business. And he trusted me, and I'm grateful for that. But Hogan, there's nothing that I know that I could add to anything. But he always treated me respectfully because he knew what I was doing, and I was helping him make money because I was making sure Zeus was where Zeus needed to be. And I was in the cars with Zeus. No. This is what they mean, and I promise you this isn't going to happen, or this is what's about to happen. Pay attention, and smarten him up as best I could in that year. And Hogan understood that. So I didn't see him again after Vince, even though we were in WCW the same time period. We just never crossed paths.
Fair enough, Maurice.
Yep. Is it true when you changed names from Dusty to Dale that was to do with Dusty Rhodes going to WCW? Yeah. Is there any truth to that rumor?
Yeah.
And how did the conversation come about?
It's 100% true. When I went to Florida in '84, Eddie Graham walked in and he says, "You can't work as Dusty Wolf." Okay. Going to Dusty. And in Florida, I kind of understood because he was like godlike in Florida in the '80s still. So I just used my middle name. Easy. And then when I'm in New York for 2 years, when Dusty came in, almost 2.5 years. It's a true story. Pat came up to me. I think we were in catering, wherever we were at. He came up, he finds me, and he said, "We can't use your name anymore." I'm like, "Why?" I didn't know Dusty was coming in. And he says, "Well, Dusty's coming in," and I'm like, "Pat, they can't tell us apart." And he looked at me real thick, and he says, "But I can't have people confusing the name." And I'm like, "All right," and I've got my initials all over everything by now. My trunks, my boots, my jacket. And I said, "Just use my middle name." Graham made me do it in Florida. It works here, I'm sure. Is that okay with you? And he says, "Yeah, that's fine." And walked off. And that's exactly what happened. 100%. And I'd be damned if they didn't have me work with him like a month later. I don't know if that was a little or what, but within a month of him getting there, I was working with him.
Maybe that was part of the thinking then as
well. That's what I'm saying. I knew that was a little to me or the fans or both, but it was just, I'm like, oh, here we go. So, but they kept me busy. So what are you gonna say?
Yep, Jack.
Yeah, of interest to me was in '91. I read that you did some shots for Herb Abrams, WWF on television. Just wanted to know what that locker room was like, and did you have any notable meetings with the legendary?
No. When I found out everything that he was into, I finally understood why every time I saw him, he had this big smile on his face. I never really talked to Herb. I can't remember who his office manager was, but that's who I always dealt with. And it's not like I made a huge number of dates with Abrams. I made like half a dozen or maybe 10. And they were always when I was already in the area anyway. I was already in New York. I was already in Florida or something like that. And he's running, and I'd pick up the phone, like a couple more paydays, right? The inmates were running the asylum as far as in the back goes, because he had no clue. He wouldn't have had a clue if he hadn't been coked up. He just didn't. But yeah, I did. Every time I see him, he looked like he's the happiest man on earth. And not that I'm an angel or anything, but I wasn't around him enough to realize, the guy was doing a kilo a day or whatever he was doing. And when I found out the stories, I'm like, no wonder it was, the smile was pasted on his face, and he couldn't help himself. But he had the world in the palm of his hands, because at that point in time, Vince was hurting. WCW wasn't doing the business that they were going to do in the next few years, and the talent was there. It's just he had no clue, and the inmates were, like I said, they were running the asylum, taking care of themselves, and not taking care of business.
And what a way to go out, right?
My wife heard that, and she looked at me and said, "Were you there that night?" I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute. My reputation's bad, but it's not that bad." Yeah, if really truthfully, if you're gonna go out in a blaze of glory. Don't just fade away. Like Neil Young, it's better to burn out than it is to fade away. Yeah, it was unbelievable. Yeah, my wife, I almost divorced her that moment.
That's tremendous. Reese.
Yeah. Dusty also noticed that you worked with The Undertaker quite early on in his career in 1991 as well. What was he like as a person back then?
I've always liked Mark. I haven't talked to him since I left Vince's office, so that's 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
People change in 30 years. But the man I knew was great. Percy would sit down and tell me, Paul Bearer would sit down and, tell me things about him. And, if he was okay with Paul Bearer, if he was okay with Percy Pringle, he was okay with me. And that's the way it became the 2 or 3 years we were around each other. Now, I haven't talked to him in 30 years, even though he probably lives about 80 miles from me.
Yep, Jack.
One of the notable personas or gimmicks that you ended up adopting that we wanted to get the story on was that of Doink. But before you explain that one, what was your experience like working with the late great wrestler Matt Bourne?
Matt, I never had a problem with Matt. Most of those guys I didn't have a problem with because they knew what I was there for, and they also knew I had a little bit of talent. I mean, I wasn't going to ever be I don't know that I would ever be considered a great worker, but they knew I was more than capable, and I could have a 20-minute match, an hour match, or a 30-second match, and that helped me with a guy like Matt, who was a little hot-headed. I only worked with him a handful of times. I never had a problem. Nothing. And that's another one. You hear the stories and you shake your head because your dealings with the person is completely different than the stories you're hearing. And you know the stories are true because of the way everything plays out. And it just kind of disappoints. But yeah, I ended up with the gimmick after I left, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Did you enjoy that?
Huh?
Did you enjoy that being somewhat of a radical departure from your usual presentation in the ring?
Might have lengthened my career, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because things became easier. I don't know. I looked at it then as a payday. I still look back at it as a payday. It was business to me. And people are saying, "Can you do this?" Yeah, Vince never said anything to me. In fact, he sent word to me through Percy Pringle. Just don't do anything stupid in the gimmick. Don't get arrested in the gimmick. Don't do TV with the gimmick. And he'll never say a word to you. He shuts other people down. He's never going to say a word to you. And so I didn't. I made sure that if I was doing anything stupid, I wasn't in the gimmick, or I didn't do TV with the gimmick. You know, people may have filmed, but I wasn't doing a TV, and then I'm doing a promo, that sort of thing. And it was business for me. It's quite simply, it was just transactional. Made some matches, made quite a few matches easier.
Yeah,
100% on that part. Yeah, it's one of those things. I don't have huge memory of happiness or whatever because of this gimmick or that gimmick. I learned early on it was about my payday. I went from being that kid that I'm a fan. Well, I'm still a fan of the older school. I am. I don't understand what they're doing today, but I went from being a fan, to a wild-eyed kid that had no real idea what was going on, to real quickly, I could make a living doing this. And if I treat it like a living, I'm better off. Mm-hmm. I could be a fan at a certain point in time, but that moment ends, it's time to do business. And I've always been, even with memories, the good ones and the bad ones. It was just my nature.
Mhm.
How did that conversation come about, Dusty, that you were allowed to then use that character outside the organization? Did you have to
There was no conversation up front. I just did it.
Oh, it was your idea.
Yeah, well, no, it was the promoter in South Africa. He says, I heard you actually put the outfit on once or twice in a house show, and they said they needed to, run around the ring and leave or whatever, that sort of thing. I said, well, yeah, but I don't have the outfit. They carried the outfit on the truck, and they had makeup people. I don't have any of that. And he says, I got it. I'll get it. Don't worry. And it was the promoter in South Africa. And so I'm okay. And in my mind, if Vince heard about it, the worst he's going to do is tell me don't do it again. And he's certainly not going to take my payday away from me. So when I came back from South Africa, I still didn't even have the gimmick. I had to get it made as far as the outfit. A couple of people picked up the phone. We heard you did it in Africa. Yeah, and I'm thinking that I'm fixing to get the cease and desist or whatever. Can you do it for us? I guess. And it just snowballed from there. And then, like I say, about a year. I've been doing about a year when I saw Percy down in New Orleans. He lived about an hour away outside of Mobile. And he came over to visit. And he said, they know what you're doing. They know all about it. And I said, well, I figured that. Because Vince knew everything. At least at one time he did. He knew everything that was going on. And what about it? He says, that's when he gave me the message. They knew I was going to see you this weekend. And just don't get arrested in the gimmick. Don't get arrested with the gimmick in your bag. Don't let the press. Don't do anything stupid. And more importantly, don't be on somebody's TV.
Yeah.
But as far as these shows go, he could care less, make your money. He's not hiring you. So, it was a little gift, I guess it was a little thank you to me, maybe,
Yeah.
Or an acknowledgement of something, maybe, or maybe it just wasn't important enough. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I used it for everything it was worth. And I have no shame in saying that. I had children to raise, and I had bought my house when I was with Vince, but I still had to pay the taxes. I still had to buy groceries and pay utilities. And I have no shame in saying I made every penny off of it I could.
Yeah, rightly so.
So in 1991, you had a match, a pretty high profile match, considering the run that Ric Flair was having as a real world champion on Superstars.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any recollection of working Flair in that particular match, or the feeling in the company when he made that historic jump?
Well, as far as the company goes, it was the greatest thing in the world because it was a big to WCW. And then Flair's going to deliver. I mean, that doesn't change. 91 Flair is still top notch. He's going to deliver. He's going to sell some tickets. And I say, I don't know what's more important, the fact that he's going to sell some tickets or that there was a big, let me stick it a little deeper and then twist it to WCW. I don't know which part was which. Or they may have been equal as far as I'm concerned. Working with Flair, I remember working with him, but I don't know details or anything. I had about 4,000 matches in my career. And some of them you remember. Some of them are memorable. Either they were that good, or they were that bad, or something stands out, right? But there's so many of them that people are like, "Do you remember doing this?" No. Thankfully, it wasn't immoral or illegal because no, I have no clue what you're talking. I know I was there. That's about it.
Fair enough.
We'll flip it on to you then. What's your favorite match that you've had, or your most memorable moment in the business?
Oh hell. I don't know. There's a toss up, about 3 or 4 of them, maybe. First time I ever worked in a tag team match for the Rock and Roll Express, me and Kenny Tillms down in Florida, because they were at their absolute peak. They had just hit that Atlanta TV. And they had just got, I mean, they may have been peaked a little bit more than this. It was 84. So they may have peaked in like 85, 86. But there was, the only place I've ever heard a louder roar from the crowd was a Hogan show. They were that over. That was memorable. Because I can remember standing in that ring with Kenny Timms, and I'm like, we got a night off. And I was greener in the grass, and I already knew this is going to be a night off. We're just going to have to do the little high spots, and when Ricky starts selling, they're hitting the ring on us. My first time making Madison Square Garden, that's always memorable, even though I was the shits. I mean, I was, not that I couldn't work, I was so nervous that if you ever see the match, you can tell that I'm about to fall over and faint because I'm in the garden. You know, here I'm a kid from South Texas. I don't have family. I don't have friends. And I've made it to the garden. I settled down and finished the match. It was never. We're never going to get more than one of those half stars from Meltzer, maybe. But in the garden, and I made the garden again later, and that was huge. Just the fact that here I'm in the garden again. I mean, some guys have made the garden 100, 200 times. I had no reason to ever make the garden, and I made it twice. I had a really good match with Lance Von Erich in South Africa one night. They had Sun City. It was a live pay-per-view for South Africa, Southern Africa, not just South Africa, but other countries too. And then there's been a few other matches that the matches may not have been great, but the fact the building got set on fire or we had riots, those were some fun nights. I look back at them now and I'm just like shake my head, but they were great because it meant you did your job. They set the building on fire on us in Singapore one night. We were in Kuala Lumpur and they had tried to attack the tour bus. Things like that. Crazy as they sound, that means you did your job. And those are memorable. Of course, when you realize that you could have died, a day later, 2 days later, it's not quite so exhilarating. But in that moment, it's a rush. It's kind of sad 30, 40 years later saying that, but it is so true that you can make that many people, and it's not just me, but you and the other heels, you can make that many people that angry that quickly. That's a rush. I see why some people get psycho. Some of those moments like that are memorable. I think you got the list for me, though. I really do. Or the first time I made the keel, that was a big deal. To make the keel, in the early 80s, the keel was still a big deal. And so I think that's pretty much my list.
What's the main difference in the two companies, we'll say, between WCW and WWF, and which one did you enjoy more?
I like working for Vince better. I like the fact that with WCW, there were many nights I showed up, signed my name, and left, and still got paid.
Nothing wrong with that.
Great. No, that was great. That mailbox money was tremendous. I still had to show up, whatever time it was. I had to make the flight or whatever, but I don't know. I didn't even want my bag. But as far as structure and knowing what you were going to do, knowing your place, knowing everybody knowing their place, not just you, but the structure, the Vince, because it was one man running the show, and everybody answered to the one man. And over WCW, it was like a revolving door and committees. And it was just a matter of WCW put themselves in the position. It was just a matter of guys making paydays because it was obvious there's no long term here. So, hands down, Vince was business wise. Vince was my favorite. Again, I enjoyed that more than once, just signing my name and leaving. I mean, that never happened with Vince. Vince never let me have a night off. Never. If I was there, I was working. When you're 20-something, that's okay. And by the time I got to the WCW, I was getting into my 30s, and it was also okay for me to have a night off on occasion.
Yeah.
bumps that started adding up.
Yeah. As those bumps were adding up, as you say, you were kind of projecting the next phase in your life. So do you want to tell people how you planned out? You knew kind of your time in wrestling was coming up and you wanted to move on to different things. So do you want to tell the fans what you're up to now?
Well, I'm a college professor. I teach U.S. history and I teach government, whether it's Texas or federal. I knew I needed to get out like 6 or 7 years before I did. Physically, I was just broken. But I didn't. I didn't get out because I didn't have an option. I hadn't given myself an option. And I started poking around the edges of a few things. And finally, in 07, I went back to school. I went back to college. And I didn't know what I was going to do then either. I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to go dig a ditch or drive a truck or build a house or something. I knew that. Even though I wasn't as broken up as I am now, it was starting. It was happening. And while I'd already earned my associates and I was on my way to my bachelor's, and I sat down with one of my professors and he's like, "You do really well with history. Why aren't you, what's your major?" And at that time it was business because that was pretty much the catch-all, right? Business degree. And he says, "Well, you do real well with history. You'd be good in the classroom." "You think so?" And I know so. And this was at Texas A&M, San Antonio. And so I changed my major right then, or literally that same day. And I got my bachelor's. That's when I started tutoring, right as I was finishing my bachelor's. And I want to say 2012. I was on the road until 2011. So I started tutoring in 2010. Or maybe even, no, it was 2010. I started tutoring in 2010 because I was tutoring and still on the road for like a year. And I got the bachelor's. And the folks at the school that I had been at when I first went back and then hired me as a tutor pulled me off the side and says, "The professor over there at A&M was right. You're doing good in the classroom, but you can't do anything without a master's degree." And I'm like, "Oh, shit, that's 2 more years." And said, "Well, okay, that's law. We can't do anything about it." So anyway, I went back and got my master's at Sam Houston State. Sure enough, they put me to work as soon as I had that master's degree. And I've been in the classroom since 2015. And then along the way, I got the second master's because one of the colleges that I teach at was like, "Well, we're going to give you some government courses." And I'm like, "I don't have a government degree. Get one." It's not that simple. So I talked to the wife and she said, "How long is it?" And I said, "The program is only like a year because I already have the one master's." And she says, "They're offering you to work. It would be crazy not to." So I got the second master's. And sure enough, as soon as I got that one, in one of the other colleges, they started giving me government classes. So that's what I'm doing now. I have this semester, before the semester's over because of mini semesters and so forth, I will be teaching 27 classes. It's 7 different schools. It's 7 different schools. 2 of them are face-to-face, and then the other 5 are online. So
Excellent.
yeah, that's why I don't even worry about the business anymore. They couldn't pay me.
Yeah, you don't. Do you watch any of the products currently? No.
My 10-year-old wants to on occasion because he's trying to figure out what Dad did.
Yeah.
I retired before he was born, and he sees a video here and there. He hears his older brothers talk, and so he's trying to figure out what Dad did. And I'm like, "Son, I know him, Jericho, or I know him, whoever it might be that's old.
Sting.
Yeah, that's it. And that's it. The rest of these guys, I don't know them. Or I know 1 or 2 when they were like very young kid themselves, just get started in the business. And I don't even know what they're doing out there because that doesn't resemble anything I did. He's trying to figure it out. So I'll watch a little bit with him on occasion. Other than that, I don't watch it. I said it earlier. I don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. It has changed so much from telling a story to being a video game that I don't get it. It doesn't entertain me. Even when I was smart to the business, in the business, I still could enjoy a good angle. the way it was laid out and the way that the guys only did what they needed tonight and that sort of thing. I enjoyed that. That was mental. It made you want to see something more. Now let's leave it all in the ring right now. I don't get it.
It's a TV show now. That's what I always say to people. It's not a wrestling show.
It's
a
not
TV
wrestling.
show.
It's 100%. It's not wrestling. It's TV production,
Entertainment.
I get it. That's what's selling. And when I look at the numbers and the profit margins every once in a while, just out of curiosity, I'm like, they're doing something right. Just because I don't understand it doesn't mean they're not doing something right, because those numbers are unbelievable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Dusty, you've been very generous with your time tonight. Want to thank you for that. But before we wrap up with final thoughts, I always like to ask this question of individuals from your generation, not necessarily, of course, that your career was mostly in the enhancement role, but what is your thoughts on would you like to see individuals that were the star makers or enhancement or whatever term you want to put on it get a little more recognition for how important they were to the business back in the day, and obviously memorable because a lot of fans remember your matches, and do you feel that we need some kind of Hall of Fame recognition, or how do you see that issue?
Well, yeah, there was a 6-year period. I was probably on TV more than the top guys. Barry Horowitz, same thing. I love Barry. He's mad at me right now because I asked what the hell he was doing when he went to TNA that night, or Impact, whatever they call themselves. He's still mad at me, but I love him. I always have. Always thought the world of him. But guys like Barry, I myself on that list, truthfully, Lombardi. Yes, it would be ego-wise. It would be nice to see a little more recognition, a little more acknowledgement, instead of the smart asses that get on the internet and you got beat, blah blah. Dude, you couldn't hold my under trunks. And that's not bragging. It's just a simple fact. It's like Muhammad Ali says, it's not boasting if you can back it up. But I used to let that really get to me, and it's working me up for this moment. But I don't let it bother me anymore because I just know that's the way people think. They firmly believe that because a pencil puts you in that position that you weren't smart or you didn't have talent or both. When in reality, I got a lot of guys, George South. George catches a lot of heat for some of the things he does, but talent-wise, George South was as good as anybody. Barry's probably the best worker I've ever worked with that nobody ever pushed. I'll say that to anybody, anytime. Iron Mike, Lombardi. There's a list. You mentioned Costello earlier. Brian was a good talent. Yes, your ego says we should. Your ego says we ought to. Reality is it will never happen. There's no money in it. And I found this out because WWE 2.5 years ago came and they filmed a documentary on me, Barry, and Steve. And you've never seen it.
Oh, really?
No, it's never happened. Because by the time it was on their schedule, they were going to edit it and then get it into the schedule. About that time is when Peacock bought out WWE's network. And the Peacock people said, nobody's going to care about those 3 guys. And it got shelved, and it has stayed shelved since then. That was when I realized 100%, even though it was 10 years after the fact, that, my career is my career, and there are some folks that appreciate that. I appreciate it. They bought my house for whatever issues that I created for myself down through those 30 years. I ended up where I am today because of that career. So I'm okay with it. But there's still a little piece of ego that 100% I would love for The Office. I was like a little kid when The Office, we wanted to do this documentary. And I'm not a big egotist. I'm not. We all have an ego or we never got into business in the first place. But I'm not that huge ego. I'm not stroke it. You have to make me feel good. But I was like a little kid because somebody remembered.
I can't see why they'd let that go to waste. Even with a video streaming service, it's already
Peacock
in the
said
can.
Peacock said nobody cared, and I tend to believe that Peacock knows what to talk about when it comes to money. And then I see comments on occasion. I don't go looking for them, but you can't avoid them all. All of them, you can't avoid them. No, they don't care. Yeah, it would be nice. It would be great if it could be a group of us. It doesn't have to be any of us individually. Those of us are still here. Our Mike's gone, but me, Steve, Gilbert, Barry, of course, Reno Riggins, some of those guys like that as a group, if they acknowledge
Mancini.
Mario Mancini, who was a little bit before me, but yeah, 100%. If they, as a group, acknowledged us, it didn't have to be the Hall of Fame. That's money to them. That's a moneymaker to them. So, but yes, a little vignette or something that you can show the 10-year-old that's trying to figure out what did you really do? Why have I put up with 5 surgeries in my lifetime? Me, having replacements and that sort of thing. Why have I done it? What caused it? Well, here you can see, but it's never happening. And when Peacock did that, I was in pretty good shape as far as I'm done. New life and all that, and then the office came calling and the video, and they shot the documentary and whatever. And I'm not going to deny it was a little depressing when I got that word about Peacock, but that also confirmed to me that I've done good in moving on. I'm not doing the conventions, and I'm not doing this, and I'm not going to some show and making a fool of myself or anything like that. I've done the right thing. So.
Did they pay you for the show, Dusty?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that was at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. And my wife was like, you could have held out for more. I said, why would I? I did an hour and a half, 2 hours in front of the camera, and I made more than that check than I made last month.
Nice.
Yeah, maybe I hold out for more, but I don't know if I hold out too much, I'm not going to be seeing that check. Well, maybe you're right. I said, yeah, I've dealt with this office before. Yeah, but they paid us. They did.
That's good.
And like I say, at the end of the day, that's all that really matters is the paydays. It really is. Yep. Because the rest of it's just temporary. Except for that videotape. That videotape never goes anywhere.
YouTube
now, yeah. I mean, it doesn't go anywhere. Oh, my gosh. And then once you see something that you never knew existed, you never even knew. Where'd that come from?
Well, for what it's worth, I think I can speak for a lot of fans who definitely appreciate the work that you did, remember the work that you did, and most importantly, now that with the passage of time, those that have any sort of sense about them or understanding of the business realizes just what a crucial role men like yourself and those names that you mentioned played. So. Again, much appreciate that, as well as your time this evening, sir.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned one thing. I'm gonna let you get out of here. Crucial. Where do you get a star if they're all beating each other? That was the one thing that the people don't understand today. That was the formula. I got to create stars, and if they're all beating each other, I don't have stars.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Maurice?
Yeah, just on that, Dusty. Like, I've talked to a lot of those men that you have mentioned, and myself and Jack we're trying to document as many people as we can from the wrestling business. Doesn't matter how big, how small. If they were a camera operator, if they worked as an editor, if they were a ring announcer, blah blah blah. We're trying to build a kind of a folder of maybe a lot of people that are unheard from. We've had a few kind of people lately. We had a WWE photographer, for example, that was there for 21 years. He'd never done an interview. He'd never done an interview before.
He was. There's no telling how important he was because of the magazine and the stills. And I get it. Yeah. If you and folks like you don't do this, nobody else is going to, because the history will be whatever they call Vince's office now, what they want it to be, or whatever Khan wants it to be. It's not going to be the history. So it's going to take folks like you.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates.